Alright, cleaning some carbs today. These are off my 1978 Suzuki GS550E. Probably pretty similar to most of the Suzuki 4-bank carbs from that year. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Couple housekeeping notes just to get started. Before I got started, I just took note of how far the adjustment screws were in. So there's 4 on top here. Turn them in until you feel, some resistance of that screw setting in, and then just count your screws in, or mark where you started and back them out and figure out how many turns out those screws were. And then same thing, there's 4 adjustment screws on the bottom, so I did the same thing for those, and then just took note of them over here in my notebook. I ordered carb kit off of eBay, so I got 4 individual carb kits. Gonna try to reuse as much stuff from the originals as possible. I just think that's probably better quality stuff. And then I'm gonna take all 4 of them apart. So I got these new fuel rails. I haven't really read anything about them, but I'm hoping that they're good. And they're aluminum with some replaceable seals, so hopefully that'll be good in the long run. My fuel rail was leaking, and we can see that middle T is not even close to sealing, so that's why I'm replacing those. Start with sliding out the rail choke rod, I guess. 4 JIS or Phillips, I'm pretty sure that they're JIS screws, and then 1 flat head on the end, and we should be able to slide that choke rod out. You don't have to take these all the way out, it's just holding that rod in, so just loosen them so we can slide that rod through. And then a flat head here on the end.
Washers on it. And hopefully this rail will just slide right out. It's quite dirty.
Try not to force it too bad, obviously, don't want to bend it. Alright, got the choke rod out, and then just going to take off these little levers that lift up the chokes because they're all falling out anyways.
Not sure if it makes a difference which ones go where. I'm sure that they're all the same, but we'll try to keep them organized. Last one.
All 4 of those out. So in order to get this back brace off, we're going to have to remove that throttle rod in there, so I guess that'll be the next target. Try to get these caps off and see what we need to do to get that rod out. Just some more Phillips head or JIS screws on top. The gasket's not too bad on there, but we might replace that one. Alright, we're going to do the same for the rest of the 4 caps, get all those caps off. Alright, got the caps off. To get this throttle rail out, there's a couple rubber caps on the edges here, I think I'll just be able to pop off with a screwdriver. And then we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these bolts that I believe are holding on the fuel. And then this key here will come off with a JIS. I think that would be all that's holding on the rail, but I guess we'll find out. All right, let's pop those caps off. Blue cap. Let's start with that screw. So that's holding some kind of key. We're gonna need to get that off, so let me grab a different tool. Well, I got that screw off, but it's gonna need a new screw for it. Let's just say that. Leave it at that. Alright, let's work on those hex bolts. Not sure what size those are. Let me grab some. So it looks like these 5 bolts are just gonna be size 8. So. Not to strip anything else out.
Pretty tight on there. I don't know if they've ever been taken off on off in the
I think these are ones, again, you don't have to take them all the way out. You just loosen them up so that rail will slide through. And then one more that's down in here. It's gonna be a pain. Oh, we got her. I don't know how loose I need any of these, but just loosen them up a bit. Hopefully we'll be able to slide that rod out. Well, I don't know what I was talking about, but you definitely needed to take those 5 bolts out. So I got all those out, and now that rod's gonna slide through here, so sorry about that. Alright, I just used a screwdriver to start to push that through, and now it's sliding out. Seems like it's probably gonna be a bear to get back in there, but we'll deal with that when it comes. Alright, once we get that rod out, I believe we should be able to pull up all of these slides and get these slides out of here right away. And they just pull right out of there. A little dirty. I'm glad that we're cleaning them. So. Can't see that over there, but my buckets aren't quite big enough to hold these. There we go. All right, these 8 screws off the back, and we should be able to pull that whole brace off. I got the spring hooked up on the front still. I'll need to disconnect that, but just those 8 screws and we should be able to take that brace off. These ones are brass, so probably be careful. Strip them out pretty easy. They're not too tight on mine, at least. There we go. And once you get that carb brace off, you should just be able to pull these guys right apart. These ones on this side had some special kind of brace in there. Not quite sure what that is for, but alright. Alright, I only have a small little ultrasonic cleaner over there, so I'm just going to start with one carb at a time. It's also helpful that way if I mess anything up. I got 3 examples of things to look at. Again, I already jotted down the screw adjustments over here, so just make sure you do that before you go taking out the adjustment screws, otherwise it's going to be tough to get them back at the same level that they were at. So, right, carb number 1 from the intake side. I guess I don't know how you're supposed to read them, but this was the intake side. This would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So this was number 1 from facing forward on the bike. I'm just gonna try to get all this rubber off, and then we'll open up the bowl. I already had the bowl open right when I tapped it off the bike, just to see what we were working with, and it was a little dusty in there, so some of that's already cleaned out, but yeah, I guess I cheated. So 4 JIS screws on the bottom here. Alright, got those out. I'm going to take the float bowl screw off just because I know that there's a rubber seal in there. I know that because I think it was this one was leaking, so try to take care of that. Yeah, there's a little rubber seal on there. Alright, I'll take this float off next. Just a little pin in there. So I can grab it. It was sliding out already before I even got in there, so hopefully they're all that easy, but little pin, and then that float will just come right out. Careful not to lose the little needle there, the fuel stopper. And we'll get some wrenches for the rest of the stuff. I don't think I'll be able to dig it out with my hands. Alright, the main jet is in size 8. Fuel inlet, size 10. Let's get those out of there. Little rubber gasket on that one just to be wary of. And then a little paper type gasket on the fuel inlet. Screws on the bottom. You got the pilot jet here. I believe that one's too small. Just an itty bitty hole on that one. Adjustment screw on the bottom here. I feel that there's a spring in there, so we'll keep an eye on that guy. longer needle. See what kind of spring we get out of there. It's like a little longer of spring. That's comparing to what I think that we'll get out of this outside one. Another one with a little rubber O-ring on. And then a shorter little spring on the inside. So the longer needle gets the shorter spring. That was on the outside. Shorter needle gets the longer spring. That was on the inside, or bottom, I guess. Alright, one more thing, we gotta get the choke out. That one, size 14. Hopefully you can just unwrench that and it'll just slide right out. Alright, and then I'm just gonna peel that little rubber guide off for the throttle rail. Alright, one more tiny one hiding in there in that pilot jet hole. Get that guy out. And there's the pilot jet. Maybe it's the main jet, who knows? Well, people know, I don't know. Alright, I got everything apart as good as I think it'll come off of that first carb, so now we're just going to dunk it into the ultrasonic. I just use a little pine sol and then mostly water, run the heat, and probably put it through like 4 or 5 times because it only runs for 4 minutes at a time, probably run through 5 times. And we'll see how it comes out. So, a little before. Even though this thing doesn't focus, real dirty in the bowl. But yeah, we'll run them through.
Toasty in there. Don't quite figure out how I'm gonna fish that stuff out here.
Water buzz. Alright, let's put one of these guys back together. Start off at the top here. And just start throwing stuff back in. Got a jet, which goes in the bigger hole, the long one does. Tighten that up a bit. Let me dump this stuff out. We have got the pilot jet, drops down in that little skinnier one. We'll tighten that guy down in there because this next one goes on top of that. So. This is the little tiny guy that goes on top of that. This is the third one that I'm putting back together. I've already put 2 back together. It hasn't been too bad of a process so far. The worst part has been getting these old gaskets off. It's just been horrible. I don't know if they had some gasket seal or something. We have the seat for the needle. Gotta make sure I put that gasket back on those. So the little gasket goes on those. And then they go down in this bigger hole. Tighten that guy down. We'll just drop the needle in right away. Goes right in that last one I screwed in. put on the float. You can usually tell which way the float goes. If you look at the little adjuster there, you can see where it has been pressing into the needle. So this side I can see the little dot there. So that's going to be the bottom where it's been pressing in to the needle. You can stick a little pin in there. Try to at least. What do we got going on? There we go. Alright, pins all the way in. Long adjuster with the short spring, that one's going on the outside, I know that for sure. I misplaced one of my springs, so I'm salvaging one from the kit that I bought. Already that spring doesn't seem like it wants to fit correctly, so I'll come back to that bottom adjustment screw once I figure out what we're going to do with the spring. Alright, we can put the choke in. And I also took a seal off for that one, so we'll just put that seal back on. Little rubber O-ring. Got that guy on there, that one goes right in the top here. Alright, and then luckily we can put that bottom bowl on without putting that last adjustment screw in, so we'll come back to that. But alright, luckily the gaskets will only go on one way because of this needle that sticks up there, so you can just line it up correctly and then make sure it gets down all the way. I noticed that around that adjustment screw it doesn't like to go down all the way, so just feed that all the way in there. Then we can slap that bowl on 4 screws, screw it back in. And since it's a new gasket that needs to seat in there, I kind of just like to, alternate screws and make sure that the gasket's going down in level. I don't know if that really makes a difference, but it makes sense in my head, so I'm kind of just crisscross patterning here to try to get that gasket in nice and flat. And then I'll go back around and tighten them all down. Lastly, we can put that throttle slide in, so slides in just like so. It should only go in one way because it's got these arms. I don't know if we'll be able to see this, but I've noticed that it's been getting stuck because that needle isn't lining correctly up, so I've just been kind of having it in just above the hole, and then I'll use a screwdriver to push that needle back so that that slot will drop down in there. So just using that screwdriver to get that needle to line up. Oop, too far. Once you get the slide down in there, you'll just have to make sure that the top is rotated correctly, and then it should just drop in. There we go. Alright, I found that adjustment screw. It was hiding in the bottom of the ultrasonic cleaner. My carb kits actually did not come with that spring, so make sure you keep an eye on these parts. You don't want to lose anything like I did that you're going to need in the end, so keep an eye on those small parts. We're going to go ahead and put this in. And the right spring will drop all the way down in there. That's how you'll know if it's the right one that fits in there. Then we can just screw in that screw. There we go. We'll adjust that later. Okay, now I got all the individual carbs back together. So now we can work on connecting all four back together, so I'm just going to start with these little rubber inlets. They connected 1 and 2 and then 3 and 4. Those go on these little knobs here. I'm just going to start by putting them on the outside carbs, and then when we connect them together, obviously it'll connect into 3 here and then into 2 there. All right. Next we had this little brace I was calling it earlier. It's for the throttle spring, throttle return spring. So this little divot is where the spring's going to hook up, and that's going to go to the outside of the carb. So divot end is going to go into carb 4 this way, like so. All right. So next up, we're going to put in these fuel rail inlets, and I'm just going to put a small amount of Dawn's dish soap around these seals just to help it slide in, and then once it's in and dries, it should tack up a little bit, hopefully help create a better seal. So that one we're going to slide into carb number 4. So slide that in. Seems to be nice and tight, so hopefully that's a good seal. And then we're going to do the same thing on carb 1. Just going to put a little Dawn's dish soap on one side there. Probably too much on this one, but. And then slide that into the end of carb number 1. There you go, nice and tight. Okay, the path I'm going to take is to connect the outside 2 first, and then we'll connect the 2 all together into one bank of 4. So just going to put some more Dawns on the outside of this fuel inlet, and on carbs 3 and 4 we have to make sure we line up all 3 of those. So the fuel rail, the brace, spring brace, and then the air inlet up top, so make sure we get lined up. And those should go together like so. Got 2 connected. Put a little Dawns on the next one. And this one only has the fuel rail, and then I believe this is like an air passage, so all we have to do is line up those 2. Together like so. And lastly, we have the T, and that's going to connect the 2 banks of carbs all into one. So same thing, just going to put some Dawns on the end of those, and then I'm going to kind of try to angle it out, or similar to the way it was when we took the old one off. And that's just because that fuel line is going to come in sort of at an angle like that, so I don't want to have to move this around once we get it in there and it sets up a little bit. So just a little bit of soap around the edges there. Try not to get too much inside the carb. Just going to connect it to the side first. It was kind of at an angle like that, enough room for that fuel line to sit on there, and then slide it into the other bank. All right, hopefully we have a nice aluminum fuel rail that doesn't leak anymore. Next up, we're going to put that back brace on, but before we forget, I'm just going to put these rubber grommets back in the top because I think it might get a little tight once we put the back brace in. So just slide these guys back in there like so. So the back brace can just slide right on over the back side like so. And then once we get those lined up, it's those brass screws, 8 of them, that'll connect that brace to the carbs. Okay, so I just slid in this throttle return lever and then hooked up that spring. I think it'll just be a little easier if we hook that up before we slide in the throttle rod, so that's where we're at now. For the throttle rod, the side with the extra hole is going to be the side with the throttle return spring, so I'm probably just going to start on this side and slide the rod through. I don't know if it makes a difference, but if it does, I'm sure we'll find out. Make sure that we get this throttle rod through each and every one of these slides. So just take your time and work it through. Now I gotta get the holes in the rod lined up with the holes that are on each slide. So I'm just very lightly gonna grab on with the pliers so I can twist that rod until I see those holes start to pop up. There we go. Again, don't grab too hard. You don't want to scratch that rod or anything. I just used a piece of paper towel to make sure I didn't scratch that up. Now we got 5 bolts to go in. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5th one on the throttle right there. These were those bolts that we took off earlier.
See if we can get them to feed in. Oh, we got one started at least.
Alright, so I got all those throttle bolts in for the throttle rail, so I was figuring now would be a good time to check to make sure everything seems to be moving the way it should. And as far as I can tell, everything seems to be moving pretty smooth. Alright, next up we got this little key that helps keep the throttle rod in place, and then one little screw. This is the one that I stripped out earlier, so we're gonna put it back in, but not very tight. That way I can replace it later. Alright, a couple rubber end caps for that throttle rod. Just pop right in there. Alright, we're gonna slide the choke lever in, and then one at a time we gotta line up these choke lifters, I guess, that go on the rod, and then they'll lift up the choke for all the individual carbs. So slide the rod in, and then tighten those guys down with the Phillips head onto that rod. Just gonna go kind of loose right now because we still gotta put the end screw in. And like I just said, down here on the end, make sure you got all your washers that I'm losing. We just had a flathead screw that holds on that choke lever.
Like so.
Lastly, we just have the top caps, the gasket, 3 screws, like so.
Unfortunately, there's not a great way to put the gasket on.
Like the Carb had grooves that it would set into, but these ones you kind of just gotta go manually. Alright, we'll go through that same process for the other 3. Last thing I gotta do is put these hoses back on because they came out with the little adapters there. There's 2 on carbs 2 and 4, and then 1 at the back of carb 3, which is the gas tank vacuum. So put those in quick. And voila, we have one complete Suzuki GS550 carb. Probably try to do a, tuning, bench tune maybe, I don't know. We'll do that at another time. It's too cold out for me to test these out at the moment, but fingers crossed we don't have any fuel leaks or anything like that, and we can tune them when spring comes. There we go.